When you think about the great forces that shape history, you probably think of armies or gold or powerful ideas. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful forces behind the rise of the British Empire was a fish? I know, it sounds crazy, but the story of the humble Atlantic cod is the story of how the modern world was built.
All right, it seems impossible. How could a single species of fish be a geopolitical game changer? Well, for hundreds of years, that's exactly what cod was. So let's dive in and unpack how this simple fish literally changed the course of history.
And our story doesn't start with empires or armies. Nope, it starts with something much more basic: faith. To really get the power of cod, you first have to understand the medieval appetite.
And the scale of this demand was just staggering. See, if you were a practicing Catholic back in the Middle Ages, meat was completely off the table for fast days, all of Lent, and every single Friday. You add all that up, and you're talking about nearly half the year. People needed a reliable alternative source of protein, and that alternative was fish.
Okay, so of all the fish in the sea, why cod? Well, it basically had the perfect resume for the job. It was everywhere in the northern waters, it tasted great, and this is the real kicker, it was incredibly easy to preserve. By salting it and air drying it, you could create a protein that would last for years, no refrigeration needed. Even the Vikings figured this out. They would pack their long ships with dried cod to fuel their insane voyages across the Atlantic.
So Europe was already desperate for cod. But the supply? Well, it was about to go from huge to absolutely legendary. And for this next chapter, we have to cross the ocean.
Can you just picture this scene? It's 1497. The explorer John Cabot sails up to the coast of what we now call Newfoundland, and he just cannot believe his eyes. The cod are so thick in the water that he reports you can literally just lower a basket with a rock in it and pull it up full of fish. This discovery kicked off an absolute gold rush, or maybe a cod rush.
That the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, they all rushed over to fish these waters. But the English had a secret weapon, a much better way of preserving the catch. Instead of just burying the fish in salt out on the ship, they set up fishing stations on the coast. They'd bring the fish in every day, give them a light coating of salt, and then dry them on these huge wooden racks in the fresh coastal air. The result was a far superior product, less salty, better tasting, and it lasted for years.
And this better product gave England a massive leg up economically. English merchants would take their high-quality dried cod down to Spain and Portugal, the very Catholic countries that needed it most, and trade it for things like wine. This incredibly profitable trade loop turned ports like Bristol into huge centers of commerce.
So, cod was making England rich, but all that wealth was quickly being funneled into military power and colonial expansion. The fish wasn't just food anymore, it was becoming a genuine strategic asset.
You see, controlling the fishing grounds became everything. And in the late 1500s, England went on the offensive. First, they started straight up raiding the Spanish fishing fleets. And then, in 1588, came the big one, the defeat of the Spanish Armada. These victories were a knockout blow. They effectively pushed Spain and Portugal out of the North Atlantic, leaving the immense wealth of the Newfoundland fisheries wide open for the English to take over.
And with control of the supply, cod became a vital cog in the brutal machine of empire. The lowest grade salt cod, the stuff that wasn't good enough for European tables, was shipped to the British colonies in the West Indies. There, it became the main, high-protein food source for the enslaved people forced to work on sugar and tobacco plantations. It was a grim but incredibly profitable trade that linked the northern fisheries to the southern plantations.
As the economist Harold Innis so perfectly put it, cod wasn't just a part of the trade, it was the lever that England used to literally pry the wealth of the New World away from Spain. It was the cheap, durable, easy-to-transport fuel that made the whole colonial system work.
So the empire was running on cod, but soon the nation itself would be too. The story now comes home, to the soot-covered cities of industrial Britain.
And once again, technology changed the whole game. The invention of steam-powered trawlers meant fishing fleets could go farther and catch way more than ever before. You add refrigeration into the mix, and all of a sudden fresh fish wasn't just a luxury for people on the coast, it could be shipped deep inland to the booming industrial cities. And what did they do with all that cheap, abundant cod? Well, they fried it and served it with fried potatoes. Fish and chips. This wasn't just a meal, this was fuel for the Industrial Revolution. It provided the cheap calories and protein needed to power the workers in the factories and mills, and in the process, it became an absolute icon or British national identity.
For centuries, Britain's dominance over the seas and its fishing grounds seemed absolute. But in the 20th century, a tiny island nation decided to fight back, kicking off one of the strangest conflicts in modern history.
Enter Iceland, a nation whose economy was almost completely dependent on cod. After World War II, they started pushing back. In 1958, Iceland declared a 12-mile fishing limit around its coast. Britain sent the Royal Navy to protest, but Iceland held its ground, and Britain eventually backed down. Then, in 1972, Iceland pushed the limit out to 50 miles. Again, the Royal Navy showed up. And again, the result was the same. Britain had to concede.
The final showdown came in 1975. Iceland made its biggest move yet, declaring a massive 200 nautical mile zone completely off limits to foreign boats. This was a direct challenge, designed to kick the British out of their richest fishing waters for good. The Third Cod War was on.
Now, Iceland wasn't just making this up. They were basing their claim on a brand new concept that was emerging in international law, the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. The idea was actually pretty simple. A coastal nation ought to have the sole right to all the resources in the waters stretching 200 miles from its own shores. It was an idea whose time had come.
So even though Britain deployed its warships, it was totally outmaneuvered diplomatically. Under pressure from its NATO allies, Britain was forced to accept Iceland's terms. In 1976, the Royal Navy sailed home. The Cod Wars were over. And the historical irony is just incredible. The nation whose empire was built on controlling the North Atlantic cod had been defeated and kicked out of those very same waters by a tiny island with a population smaller than the city of Bristol.
The story of cod is just this powerful reminder that history is so often driven by the mundane things we take for granted. The food we eat, the resources we need. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? From silicon to lithium to fresh water, what is the cod of our time? What simple commodity is quietly building the empires of tomorrow?